Good evening. Welcome to Rose City Politics. It is June the 9th. Our regular panel tonight includes Doug Sartori, Pat Papadeas, and myself, John Liedtke. If you are a Patreon subscriber, thank you so much. If not, head to patreon.com/Rose City Politics. We appear in print monthly in bizxmagazine.com. Make sure you go pick up a copy of that print issue. Our next column comes out in their special summer edition. Make sure that you like, follow, share, and subscribe to us. We're on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and where you get your podcasts. And as always, Rose City Politics is broadcasting live on tape, hopefully not for much longer. And it's been thanks to the kind support of Liuna 625, Building Better Communities. It is good to be here tonight with both of you, Doug and Pat. This is going to be a pretty fun show. We're short on time, though, so I hope you don't mind if we just dive right into the topics and skip the pleasantries. We'll get right into it with the City of Windsor and University of Windsor announcing a new plan for Adie Knox. They're getting rid of the pool. We found out about this yesterday. Public consultation ends in 5 days. It's a $42 million investment being panned right now at the Adie Knox Herman Recreation Complex. It's pitched as a partnership by the City of Windsor and the University of Windsor after agreeing to share the new Lancer Center pool at the University of Windsor and rip the pool out of Adie Knox. The tentative agreement, which requires City Council approval, and that is being rushed to Council next Monday, would accommodate 93% of existing bookings at Adie Knox, with 7%, the remainder relocated to the Aquatic and Training Center downtown. Free parking would be provided to city residents at the Lancer pool. There'd be no fee increase for pool usage by city residents who use it, but it would also see the existing baseball diamonds and a lot of green space at Adie Knox removed to add 251 parking spots to the existing 35 parking spaces for a grand total of 286 parking spaces. The city would be providing upfront capital contributions as well as annual operating subsidies to the university, which it's been said would cost less than operating a separate swimming pool at Adie Knox annually. The city, as I said, launched a public consultation, which is running for roughly a week, offering residents input on what the new amenities should be at Adie Knox, so long as you don't want to let them know that it should be a pool or that you don't want them to make this investment, not options for you to include. Now, the city is hoping to access the federal government Green and Inclusive Community Building Fund that's focused on supporting underserviced communities, and they're seeking the maximum of $13.5 million to help fund the estimated $42 million upgrades to Adie Knox. According to CTV Windsor, the city would be providing $3 million upfront to the university and $200,000 in annual expenses. It's projected to save $150,000 annually, which in the grand scheme of a budget is almost a rounding error, especially after a few years. And with a project completion date of May 2022, it's clear there's a reason why public comment is reduced to 5 days, and they're rushing this to council on Monday. I was really surprised. We were all surprised. I mean, I can say that without speaking too much for the two of you here. When this dropped into the chat that we have, it seems as if I understand that it's federal money that's been made available here. But what's the last time, Doug, that comes to mind when we saw a project like, I mean, I guess we just talked about it last week with Sandpoint Beach, but this was completely out of left field, in my opinion.
Yeah, you know what this reminds me of is the Christmas lights situation, where you have something that may or may not be a good idea, and it gets bounced out on such an incredibly short timeline that there's really not a lot of time for public discussion or for public opinion to really gel. This debate is going to be over before it starts on this timeline. And I kind of have a problem with that.
You know, that's sort of what I'm seeing here with 5 days for public input. That's not even enough time for there to be a media story about what the results of the public input is, let alone time for people to prepare to be a delegation based on the results of public input. It really seems like this is being pushed forward in such a way, and I'll bring your voice in here, Pat, that, are you going to be the one on the offside here? Because are you going to be the one who decides that you don't want to see a $42 million investment into Adie Knox. It really seems designed to push people offside from the broad consensus that we don't even know if that exists. Pat?
Right. And why does it have to be either or? Why is it like, why is this $42 million investment in the West End in this community center specifically tied to the closure of the pool? I find it fascinating that, in fact, they would start this process, talk about the grant, obviously have had meetings with the university to make this deal, and only then will it go to city council. I mean, really setting up the pressure under these circumstances. And again, the public consultation, that's a joke to say that that's a public consultation. I haven't gone through the questionnaire, but my understanding is that they actually don't give the option, do you want a pool? And let's go back to some background. As for listeners who may not know, this is not the first time that there's been an attempt to close the Adie Knox pool. It came back, I think it was in 2013 or so, when they wanted to shut it down so it could be part of the aquatic center. And we know what happened to Waterworld, and we know the result of what happened to a community center that closed its pool, and look at the result there. So it could move to the aquatic center. And then it happened again, and I pulled this one. This was back December 17, 2019. Headline, Adie Knox pool rink left alone after public outcry. This is the third time in my recent memory that they have attempted to close down the Adie Knox pool. This time, who knows where, I mean, they're just going to exhaust people with this. So really what happened was this came as a result of a proposal by City Hall as part of a plan to build the downtown Windsor International Aquatic Center. And then they commissioned a report for a 20-year master plan back in 2017. So they didn't close Adie Knox, they commissioned this report, and all things led to, now we want to close down the pool again, this time to move those services to the Gino A. Marcus facility. Now, the idea is that this agreement with the university is closer. It's about 1.5 kilometers. It's in the West End. And so now they're rounding up that this is an investment in the West End. And there's no question that $42 million is an outstanding investment in the West End if it goes to Adie Knox. Now, I realize that the important question was, will the city go ahead regardless of the grant? And so I think some of the timing involves the grant issue. But the story, and correct me if I'm wrong, says that the mayor has committed to this project regardless of the grant. So that leaves us about $13 million, right? If that's the grant, $13 million that the mayor, because we can't say city council, hasn't gone to them yet, is willing to commit regardless if they get the grant. So let's put all of this in perspective. 1.5 kilometers may not seem far, but talk to anyone who understands the value of these community centers in neighborhoods in the community, and particularly in the West End, which we've talked about enough. Always the one on the chopping block. In fact, as you mentioned, John, the amount of savings that they're going to have is a pittance compared to some other things that we pay for in this community. And most notably, to compare apples to apples, the fact that the aquatic center costs us $10,000 a day or $3.5 million. That's the investment that we make as taxpayers in this community in order to keep those doors open. Of course, we're in pandemic and all of that, but that's what it was pre-pandemic, and I have no reason to think that that's not going to continue. So we have to put all these things in perspective when we have this conversation about what is happening right now.
Yeah, Pat, I think when I saw this first initially, and we had a conversation in the chat about it, on the face of it, there's a lot to like about this deal. If you are reading the narrative that has been provided through the press by the mayor's office, it certainly sounds good. Big investment in the West End, an upgraded pool for the neighborhood. It's only when you start to dig into the details. For example, I saw in the chatter online that there is a much better transit accessibility to Adie Knox versus the St. Denis Center. Now, maybe that would be a change that would be made, but these are the kind of things that you need time to like elaborate, and the community has to have this discussion so we can find out whether it's a good deal or not. And what struck me about this is that this seems to me like an investment that is being imposed on the West End community. It's being pushed on the West End community, and the narrative is not aimed at the West End. The narrative is actually aimed at people like me. I live in South Windsor. I don't live near Adie Knox. It's all very abstract to me because that's not a facility I would use. So we have an investment that is being proposed, and the proposal is such that it's almost meant to diffuse criticism and create, a consensus among the people that maybe the mayor politically cares about. But imagine imposing an investment on Ward 1, or imagine imposing an investment on Southwood Lakes on 1 week's notice. Do you think that that's something that would happen, or that the mayor would stand for?
Right. Yeah, West End is always, what really concerns me here is that this has become a package. In other words, we're going to take the programs, the swim programs, minus the diving board, by the way. I did notice that in the story. There's not going to be diving because of the way that facility is being designed at the university. And they're going to take the same programming, which, by the way, Adie Knox, and my children went swimming to Adie Knox. Actually, my children went swimming and took swimming lessons from Waterworld, and then Adie Knox. And my goodness, there's something to be said about community pools. And they're not talking about closing the community center. They, in fact, are talking about an investment in that community center. And I think that is a terrific thing. But generally speaking, the folks that use it, seniors use it. A lot of people from actually Riverside use it. This is great when within the catchment area and without the catchment area in our community, people are using these community centers, because it's also good, if I may say, for the surrounding businesses. People will go out, people will go for lunch, people will go to the convenience store. They're rooted, they're in a community. So these services, and no one is suggesting that they're not being used, right? They are at capacity at Adie Knox. So assuming that they've taken 100% of the programming, they're saying that 93% will move to the university. Now, Doug already mentioned the transit, but there's something very different about walking to your community center, and 1.5 kilometers is actually a distance if you are within walking distance, but it's also something, there's a community built around that. With all due respect to the university, and in no way am I suggesting, this is also another fabulous investment by the university on College Avenue with this amazing facility that it's going to be, regardless of what happens here. That's already planned, and that's already going to happen. But moving 93% of those to the university, to the new pool, to the new development, and 7%, they can't accommodate it all, 7% will move to the aquatic center. We are not adding programming here. And so why are we not doing that? There's obviously room for more programming. We should be building up the West End. This is not about dollars, okay? Yes, it'll take dollars, and we're already committing the dollars. And if the mayor says there's another 13 million he's willing to commit to make this happen regardless of the grant, because let's not forget, the trolley and the beacon was also based on a grant, and they were quite sure about that one and didn't get it. So anything is possible, but there is that other possibility. And so, you know what? I know this is going to sound like, oh, the big spender, but I don't know why the university got embroiled in this deal. Why the university itself said, okay, this is the way. The university could approach the city and say, look, this is something that we're going to do anyway, but we would like commitment and partnership by the city of Windsor. We'd like to open up partially, right? Because they're going to run all sorts of programming to the community and add to the West End's programming. Keep Adie Knox Pool, invest in it, upgrade, do all the things you're going to do with or without the grant, and commit to partner with the university. Why are those two things linked? To me, this is not the right approach, and I'm sorry that this is the approach that the university has somehow landed in dealing with this mayor, and not even a commitment yet from city council. Not the right approach.
it doesn't look good for the university to have been, I don't want to call them like secret negotiations, but how else do you describe it when council doesn't sound like they were aware of it?
Well, that's right. I mean, if there was a meeting with the mayor and staff and whatever, and the university, and they said, look, we're going to give you X dollars if you agree to this, and we're tying the closing of a community pool, why not say, if you're the university, look, we don't want anything to do with it. That's your decision if you want to close the pool. This is what we're prepared to offer. And this is what we want from you. Don't give him 3 million, get the grant, give him 13 million. How about that? Or 5. Yeah.
So in the Windsor Star article, it touches on a different element that, of course, it wasn't included in the city release. But it says one of the main reasons that the mayor is so focused on getting this done is because of the developments at the Grace site with their 500 units that are coming in. He says, quote, "We must plan for the residents these investments will bring." So that goes back to what you were saying, Doug. It's very clear this is being imposed upon people. There's a reason for it. He wants to be able to, I guess he's doing a lot of legwork here for the developers, Fairmont Properties here, wanting to see these properties sold, whatever. I mean, commendable. It's here or there. It's not, I think, ideal the way it's being done. But I want to ask you, about what does public consultation mean when you're faking it, Doug, when it's being done top down and imposed, and it's clearly not even for the residents that live there right now. It's for a new group you're hoping to lure in.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that the city overall could do a better job of public consultation. But this one strikes me as particularly egregious. You're making a big change to a neighborhood, and the vehicle you have for soliciting feedback is a very narrow survey, online survey. Back in the May issue of BizX, I actually wrote about public consultation in the context of the stage 2 funding for the mega hospital project. But I think it applies here. The issue with relying on an opt-in approach like an online survey is that most people don't take part. Back in 2017, Municipal World surveyed Canadians and found that only 20% have ever participated in a municipal public consultation. And of course, that fraction would come with some serious demographic biases. The way to do this is to canvass the neighborhood. You've got to go and talk to people in the neighborhood. Do you use the pool? How do you use the pool? What would it be like if you had to go to a different location? You've got to leaflet that neighborhood. You've got to make contact with people and get them to comment. How many people who are going to be impacted by this, seriously impacted in the quality of their life, don't even know that it's happening? You have to be pretty plugged in in order to know that this is even happening, and for it to filter down to you in 5 days time. I really think that on a broader scale, it would be really, really good for the city to think about the way that it engages in public consultation, and maybe think about some principles and guidelines for quality public consultation. This would be a good use of dollars for consulting. Go out and find out what the state of the art is. What are your options? Bring it back to council and come up with a set of principles for public engagement that the city must follow. To me, I think that would an approach like that would short circuit a lot of this stuff where, this is really a bad example of public consultation, but none of the public consultations that the city does are particularly great.
Right. And I mean, sorry, John, I think that all our listeners know that when we're talking about the West End specifically and the history of closures and community fighting to keep things open in the West End, we are talking about in terms of socioeconomics and demographics, we're talking about a community, the West End is generally what we have identified as the most in need to tackle issues of poverty and child poverty. And so there is a link to these community, as much as we want to say a building is inclusive, and I'm getting, even that language, but my goodness, there's something different about walking into this nice old building in this neighborhood and something very different of going to the aquatic center or going to an Olympic facility for your, seniors exercise program. So these are, real impacts that, you know, these antiseptic dollars and cents measurements from here, temperatures of the pools do not express and do not inform what is truly happening. And as Doug said, without the public consultation piece, that is missing. You know what's going to happen? City Council is going to get a report that says, you know, 72% of the people surveyed think there should be pickleball at Adie Knox, because those were the options that were given. And suddenly, hopefully there will be some critical thought. Now, having said that, Ward 2, where this is all going on, is represented by Councillor Fabio Constante. For the record, I did reach out to him and he was not available to join us today. Hopefully he will come on the show and talk about it. There were a few quotes in the paper. Not clear where he stands on this. I would imagine that he's going to absolutely welcome a $42 million investment in Adie Knox. But this other piece that is contingent, apparently, that we put it into a package and said, here it is, do you like it or not? I don't know where he's going to land, but essentially, you know, he was very clear back in 2019, at the time when they took this almost risking the closure of Adie Knox pool off the table as part of that plan. And that was the only thing I think that came off the table in that master plan. He was very, very clear how he felt then. What has changed? Is it the dollar amount? Is that something that he's going to live with? I imagine he's going to wait for the public consultation and maybe do some of his own consultation, because those are his constituents that we're talking about.
It's Wednesday. There is no time for any of this consultation. He was quoted in Blackburn as saying, this is a different proposal than what we've seen in the past. And the direct quote is, community input is going to be vital towards this proposed solution. I know many residents have a deep affection for Adie Knox, and ensuring community voices are heard during this public consultation is critical to the plan. Okay, it's Wednesday. Like, you've lost half of it right now. And here's my question for you guys. I want to get this out. Why does this have to be approved on Monday by council? Can they not make the application and say, we've reached an agreement in partnership, tentative 2 approvals, it'll be brought back to council at that date for approval? Like, why the rush? Do you think that really taking advantage of the fact that, you know, we're in COVID, it's not being used, so there's not as much opposition as there would be in a regular year? It's not like people are going in and out of the building.
So my understanding, John, is that there is a grant deadline in play, but all of this can be done. You can get authorization from council to apply for this grant. There's nothing in, and I haven't seen the grant, so I'm just going to talk off the top of my head, but I'm going to bet that there's nothing in this grant that says you will be successful. You will most likely be successful if you close a swimming pool in your community in order to get this money. Okay, so that's just a bunch of bullshit. That this has to be tied to that. All City Council has to do is say, go ahead and apply for the money for the improvement of Adie Knox Herman Community Center, Recreation Center. And then we're going to talk about the details. Those details, that particular issue does not have to be in that grant. And in fact, take it out of the grant. And then no grant is going to tell you that you couldn't have done something with part of your amenities. Like, there are so many different ways to do this. I do have to say this is a political show. I think that what's different here for Councillor Constante is that not only is he dealing with the constituents and what might be happening to this particular something being taken away from a particular community center, don't forget that the university is also in his ward. So now you've got the big guns, right, who are want a deal. I'm sure that the university wants, what is it, $3 million that they're getting plus the operating costs. I'm sure that they want that. Although, with all due respect, it is not a lot of money. Okay, that is not a lot of money to sell your soul for, and to partner with the mayor, because this has not gone to City Council. I think that there should have been a lot more conversation about what is it that the broader community that we live in, particularly the West End as a university, what will be the reaction. because now they're embroiled in it for absolutely no reason. But they are a big part of War II, and I think that there's going to be a lot of different kind of pressure on Councillor Constante that didn't exist there before.
Yeah, it may well be that the grant requires a shovel-ready project, and it may be that a shovel-ready project has to have city council approval. But think about the time it took to negotiate this deal. I would assume that this grant has been out there for a while, that the city has known they would be using this grant as part of the package. Like, you don't put this kind of a package together with the university as a partner without knowing where all the money is going to come from. So I think that the deadline for that grant is being used as an artificial deadline to kind of put pressure on city council to force a decision before they've had a chance to really ruminate on it.
And it's going to be very tough, very tough. Like, what are your options at this point if you're a city councillor?
Yeah, very difficult. Pat, I want to ask you something too. Do you see any parallels between what's happening here in Fabio's ward and what happened just we talked about it last week at Sandpoint Beach? Do you think that, like, there seems to be, maybe there's an MO here that's consistent between the two? What do you think?
Absolutely. In fact, and this is not to take away from the West End, but you tell me where $42 million has been, that's a big investment in one community center. And so I think that absolutely, there are some really interesting chess pieces moving around the board.
I want to go back to something that you were saying at the top, and forgive me, I forget which one of you it was that said it. Love these shows when we get into it. In the CBC article, the mayor was very clear at his news conference that he gave, quote, "Let me be absolutely clear. We need to undertake this investment in West End infrastructure, and I am committed to getting this completed regardless of the success of our application." So again,
right.
It's very clear, I will force this thing through no matter which way I have to get it done. And he goes on to say that if Ottawa doesn't provide the money, then we'll just stagger construction over the next period of years to meet these goals. I mean,
well, if Ottawa doesn't give the money, which the mayor is entitled to, what we're going to do is we're going to have constant tweeting every day, a different news story, and we're going to go out with paint and draw a line in the middle of the pool at Adie Knox to be mad at the big bad federal government that doesn't listen to Windsor's mayor as he struts. My goodness, this is, I think we're going to have another topic here, but boy, am I going to be ready for that one. Unreal. And that's what's, the blame, who's going to be the blame? He's putting this community on the hook. Let's put it right now and be very clear. $42 million in the hook, and he's putting an albatross around the university's neck for a pittance in order to do it.
How much was the aquatic center? 29, and then it ballooned to what, 81?
80.
So 42. We can expect this.
His track record is.
If it goes wrong, we could be looking at $120 million from this thing. I find it. He's clearly looking to play this strong mayor role. Excuse me. And I don't know. Maybe it's going to work for him come the next election, whatever he's looking to do. But it's a completely different style of things than we see here traditionally. And I think it's an interesting tack for him to do. I'm going to be interested to comment about it as it plays out.
Right. Yeah, I hope that the university sees its investment, which they've already committed to, and a terrific project and all of that. I hope that they see it as very separate from this. They're building something. They have ability to offer programming to the community. There are organizations, maybe the United, whatever. There are ways in which to structure that so that it adds programming in the West End and to the community at large. And there's absolutely no reason for them to have tied it to this. They can do that. And if the city, the mayor, and with the backing of city council, then wants to close Adie Knox, let them have the courage to step up in this community and say, this is the decision we've made. Not that way. They are not, they should be, I said it again, they should be adding programming. But one way or another, if the university has the capacity to offer programming to the community, they have it regardless of what happens to Adie Knox. So the university should do what it should do. The university should do what's best for the university. And because I believe that they are a good corporate and educational partner in the community, do what they can for the surrounding community and be a good neighbor. And after that, city, we'd also like you to understand that we are doing this for the community and come to the table. 3 million, 5 million, 7 million, whatever it is, and you go ahead and conduct your political business about a community center somewhere else. This does not have to be tied to the deal.
Yeah, I just wanted to pick up on what John had said earlier, talking about election timing. There's a reason that the city has an asset investment plan. There's a reason why investments are timed and scheduled on a long horizon into the future. And there's all kinds of capital projects that are worthy in our community, and they are queued, and they're queued according to a set of criteria that are well understood. What's happened at Sandpoint Beach and what is apparently happening here is that we're going outside of that process in order to make investments happen immediately. And the reason that you would do that is election timing. There is an election next fall, and it sure seems to me like this is something that the mayor would like to have on his literature. Maybe he'd like to see it on the Ward 2 councillors' literature, but there's a reason that we have a process. And I think part of the reason that we have that process is to take some of the politics out of capital investment from the city.
Yeah, which is probably why people want to go and take it out of the process that we have to be able to play politics with these things. We've seen it before. I think we'll see it again. It's not a good track record. Let's stick on the topic, though, I guess, of the strong mayor, and we'll go into Mayor Dilkens' continued quest. He's pushing still to get Windsor Essex residents vaccinated in the tunnel. And Mayor Dilkens is continuing to blame the Canadian government for the US federal government's not giving a green light. The state of Michigan is also still standing in the way. However, according to the Windsor Essex County Health Unit, over 70% of Windsor Essex residents 18 and up have received at least one dose of a vaccine. The medical officer of health said yesterday that it was a milestone yesterday with 6,675 doses administered, and that 84% of vaccines distributed in Windsor Essex yesterday were in fact second doses. Now, this is an issue that we've discussed for the past number of weeks on the show. Most recently, last week, Mayor Dilkens took to AM 800 to say that anyone suggesting there are available doses in Windsor, Essex for first or second doses is an outright, quote, fabrication of the truth and a, quote, lie, which is, not the case, as we're seeing second doses booked throughout the region, with those milestones that I just mentioned above. The health unit stated today that individuals who received their first mRNA vaccine, that's the Pfizer and Moderna, on or before April 18th, they're eligible to book a second dose at a mass vaccination clinic, pharmacy, healthcare provider that's administering vaccines. After weeks of negotiating with Moderna, the federal government today announced that 7 million more doses of Moderna will be arriving starting next week. The government says that they will be receiving 2.4 million vaccines from Pfizer each week this in June, before decreasing slightly to 2 million weekly until the end of August. We're set to receive at least 55 million doses total by the end of July. To date, Canada has administered more than 27 million doses of vaccine, and more than 62% of the population has been vaccinated with at least one dose, which puts Canada at one of the top 3 countries per capita in terms of single dose rates in the world. Now, this issue has, spilled into a war of words between Mayor Dilkens and MP Kusmierczyk. Mayor Dilkens said on AM 800 last week, and I will summarize this, he took great offense to anyone who says that there are vaccines sitting in freezers. He said, quote, "There are no doses in freezers. They don't exist. To the extent that our medical officer of health says he's sitting on 500 shots of Moderna, it's because there's no certainty from the federal government that the second doses of Moderna are coming as scheduled, and they have to be held for temporary foreign workers. The system doesn't have 1.5 million doses waiting in freezers. because of mismanagement. That is an outright fabrication, and I would say an outright lie. There is nothing sitting in a freezer. So, you could do your own fact checks on that as I was going through it. The Modernas are here. There is a consistent schedule with it. We've been going on, this is what, week 3 of this story. The mayor has now decided to take it very personally. And he has, taken the gloves off, levying accusations against MP Kusmierczyk that he is a liar in the media. He didn't label him specifically, but anybody who's reading between the lines is able to see where that was directed at. And for his credit, MP Kusmierczyk responded through the media on AM 800 saying the argument that the Canadian government stands in the way is false. The US government controls and owns those vaccines, and they've prohibited those vaccines from being used and exported across the border. They've also prohibited Canadians from crossing the border to get the vaccine. There are very real barriers preventing those surplus vaccines from getting over, but we have negotiated an agreement with the US to deliver 2.4 million Pfizer every week from Kalamazoo, and we will see if we can keep getting more. So, kudos to MP Kusmierczyk for coming out and setting the record straight on this issue. They're both talking around each other. It's like a boxing ballet right now. They're trying not to directly jab the other party, but we can all see what's going on here. Doug, I'll bring your voice in first on it. It's getting really personal here, and the only next level of escalation is for one of these two people to call someone a word that is going to result in an integrity commissioner complaint or something. What's your take on where we're at? And I don't mean to be laughing at it, but I mean it's schoolyard bullying.
Yeah, I agree. I think that there's some interesting elements here. There is a very clearly a political element when you see Drew Dilkens repeating talking points that you're also hearing from federal and provincial conservatives in Canada and Ontario, and you're seeing them repeat talking points that Drew Dilkens is using. There's no question that there is a political component here, and Mayor Dilkens is trying to reinforce a narrative about the vaccine rollout that I think, honestly, I think as time goes by and people's anxiety about vaccines starts to lessen, that I think that the hollowness of those claims will become more and more apparent. Look, you mentioned the date. If you got your vaccine, your first shot on April 18th, you can book today. That's a 56-day gap between first and second dose. The minimum possible gap is 28 days for Pfizer and Moderna. It's 12 weeks for AstraZeneca. So, and I anticipate, based on the flow and based on the fact that first doses are starting to dry up, that what we're going to see in the coming days and weeks is that number get closer and closer and closer to the 28-day minimum. So who is Mayor Dilkens talking to here? He is talking to people who are waiting for their second dose. That's the population, people who are waiting and anxious for their second dose. As you know, once they are able to book their appointment, I think a lot of that anxiety is going to go away. So there's a political component, but now I want to bring it to the personal component. There is obviously an issue between Drew Dilkens and Irek Kusmierczyk. If you want to go back to the anonymous sources coming out of City Hall that were interestingly and I think tellingly not denounced or criticized by the mayor, and those anonymous voices made some very nasty personal remarks about MP Kusmierczyk. You can start there and you can go all the way up to this. And this is what I think. I think that the mayor's political judgment is being clouded by his personal beef with MP Kusmierczyk. Who knows what the source of that beef is? This is not a political winner. This is a sugar rush. It's something that it feels good to be doing right now. But as the days and weeks go by, it's going to be less and less effective. And I think that what electors are going to be left with is that image of a second line, because there was already a line at the international border, that image of a second line painted in the tunnel, hastily painted, kind of fuzzy line painted in the middle of the tunnel. I honestly think that that's what electors are going to be left with, and that this is not going to be a story that does credit to Drew Dilkens' reputation, nor should it.
We saw that it got picked up by a National Post columnist, I believe, who tweeted about it, just saying, really? In the tunnel? That's what he wants to do? That's the plan?
Right. Because if you live outside of the Windsor media bubble and you aren't kind of in the reality distortion field that's created by the significant influence the mayor has here, you look at this and you think that's freaking stupid. Like, you know,
It's absolutely moronic and idiotic.
Yes.
Well, he calls it silly and ridiculous himself.
First of all, there's already a line in the tunnel, everyone. Okay. I mean, what a joke. What a joke. Like, what, I mean, so cheap. What a cheap political ploy to go and mark the bottom and draw a line in the tunnel. To me, it's a mockery. By the way, guys, I remember listening to the show, and I think it was Melinda Monroe who was on the show a couple of weeks ago. And I have to say the best 5-minute segment, and I laughed out loud, was you guys discussing how to maneuver a 3-point turn in the tunnel. Hilarious stuff. And I know that a day or two after, suddenly it wasn't going to be cars, it was going to be golf carts. So kudos, I think, to RCP, who like had to force them to figure out like another form of it. The whole thing is a joke and deserving of mockery, absolute mockery. There's no question. Here's the playbook for the mayor. Everything Doug Ford and provincial conservatives good. Everything federal government, Prime Minister Trudeau, Irek Kusmierczyk, federal MP, only one in the federal government in our region to be at the table, bad. Now, let's not forget, and it's worthy to note that Irek Kusmierczyk was a city councillor, right? And elected as, and then he left city council politics. So it's not like they haven't worked together before, and it's not like there is a history in their relationship. And I'm sure we could go in and take a look at that, what that looked like. There's no question that the lobbying is coming from one direction, and because there are different personalities and characters involved. Mayor Dilkens is a very different personality than MP Irek Kusmierczyk, who is, by all accounts, you know, a not exactly one to come out swinging. So even that part that you mentioned, John, is pretty strong for Irek. I mean, he is just, you know, knuckle down, do the research, find out the information, work towards solutions. I mean, when he was first elected, the first thing he did was like he was going to meet with like representatives from different parties to get together and talk to them. I mean, he didn't get the memo of how party politics is played, and maybe he wants to even stay out of the fray. But this is not what's happening at the municipal level, which doesn't even have a party attached to it. So it's just absolutely, for anybody, any political observer who's watching this, it is either a joke or it's pretty disgusting what is happening. Enough is enough. And here's the thing, newsflash, the rollout of the vaccine in the province is up to the province, okay? So, you know, we have to, so it's all a diversion tactic. We are now about to reopen. Businesses are closed, people are suffering. We've all had enough, there's no question. But this is not one level of government that can be pointed to, and this is what is constantly being done by the mayor. Just the other day, there was, did anybody see it? It was about the pharmacist and the tampering of the COVID vaccines. And did anybody see that?
Yep.
Guys, like, what are we talking about? Like, because that was the original thing. It was about the surplus that pharmacies had. Are we really going to take, this is like what we would consider sort of the chain of evidence in criminal law. Are we just going to like just go over and take them from any pharmacy? Nobody knows, like, Health Canada has a role to play in this. So that's one federal department. Look at all the government agencies, federally, provincially, forget municipally, and with our relationship with the border. And by the way, do we have an agreement with the other half of the border, the other half of the tunnel? Do we have? Has he come out and said, yeah, so we got our half done. Are they going to close it on their end? Are they going to allow, like, what the hell does he think? How foolish is this to believe that Mayor of Windsor is going to somehow handle 3 levels of government, relationships about across an international border at those 3 levels, all the public institutions and agencies and ministries that would be involved to execute something like this. And by the way, all, and I love my city, and all for the sake of the Windsor residents, for his constituents. Like there aren't other people more in need in this province or even in this world. Like I'm ashamed. I'm actually ashamed. And you know, okay, I'll stop now and keep going probably after. But to me, either he is, I'll just say this and wrapping my point up. Either he is extremely foolish and doesn't know how government works, right? Or he knows how government works and is playing politics during a pandemic and is not worthy of being the mayor of this city. One or the other.
Yeah, there's no question, Pat. Like I totally support what you're saying. There's no question. This is purely political. And what surprises me is that more voices aren't calling out the small ball nature of what the mayor is trying to do. You know, we have governments negotiating the transfer of millions of vaccines. And what Mayor Dilkens wants to do is go to Detroit and go dumpster diving for, you know, the dose left at the bottom of the vial or whatever. This is just not going to make a material difference on the pandemic in Canada. And it's absolutely not what our mayor should be focused at. Now, I want to talk about something, you know, we hear all the time, whenever election time comes around in a partisan election in Windsor, Essex, we hear about needing a seat at the table, how important it is to have representation in government. You know, whoever it looks like is going to win, that is a major argument in those campaigns. We need a seat at the table. We've heard it from candidates across the political spectrum in all the ridings in this region. What I would like to see is people connecting the importance of good relations with governments at the provincial and federal level with what it means for a mayor of a city to create a toxic argument and a toxic debate, which is an absolutely no-win position for the federal government. He is creating this toxic debate with the federal government, playing political games, and you can't tell me that the government of Canada doesn't see what Drew Dilkens is doing. What is that doing to our ability to be heard in Ottawa? What does it mean when the mayor of Windsor is making himself not only a transparently opposition figure, but a somewhat absurd and ridiculous figure to Ottawa? If you are a commentator or a columnist in Windsor and you talk about how important it is for us to have representation in government and a seat at the table, I would love to hear how you square that with this.
It's a really good point, Doug. It's a really good point. And I know that we talk about the issues and the decline in media and the resources and all those things there, but there's no question that the average person out there who can only tune in to 5% of what's happening around them in terms of the news, because we're busy, paying mortgages and working and trying to work and all those things. What they're left with is possibly not a really good understanding of what an incredible impact how he is conducting himself will have in the big picture view of what's in best interest for this city. Why he wants to go to war. And by the way, when I said Doug Ford good, we also have to recognize that the municipality, this corporation of the city of Windsor, and the thing we call the municipality, is a creature, as those of us that look at the Constitution like to say, of the provincial government. So there's absolutely good reason to work with the provincial government. But if actually you're going to be, coming to fisticuffs in any way, it's usually with the provincial government, because either they're not transferring, they're not doing, they're uploading, they're downloading in a way that you don't want. And so that is usually where those really tense conversations happen. And he has picked, the federal government, which has actually been like, look, I know that I'm a partisan, but by all accounts, take a look at what has flowed into this community despite Drew Dilkens, and whether we're going to see a change now, whether it was the investments in transit, the investments in the agencies like the mission and like the food banks and all of the funds that have come during the pandemic. This is the federal government that's done that, and they're doing it for all communities and all of that. But I really think that you're absolutely right. At the end of the day, push is going to come to shove. There's no question that they've taken notice, and I don't know how that would work well for us in this community. And it's a real shame, because it absolutely didn't have to happen. This was not his fight. You know, I want to go back to the practicalities, because it's just so absurd that we're even talking about it. How many people can you vaccinate in a golf cart going back and forth in the 15-minute wait, if you do it on the outside in the tent or in the inside where the fumes are or whatever, in a day?
Who's driving the golf cart?
Like, how many of those are happening, and who's doing it, and who are the nurses, and who are the health, like, and frankly, I'm going to mock the sign up, the 11,000 or whatever people who are signing up on his waiting list. Like, what is he going to do with that waiting list? Is he like responsible for the delivery of vaccine in arms in this community? I have a theory. Okay, this is just a speculation. This is not a fact. Okay, so for those, I think this all happened because he's embarrassed with what happened when he crossed the border, sneaking in through Sarnia, picking up his $1,700 worth of whatever it was, literally doing a Ted Cruz, blaming the kid. Don't get me started. And because of that embarrassment, and because he was offered the vaccine, which he did not take, right? Suddenly, the idea is, oh, look at, they have extra vaccines and we can have them. And boom, this is the shiny object. And now he's doubling down and tripling down, and it's a mockery.
If this is crisis communications, I don't want to see what it's like when it's really bad. But just ending on this point, it's not a change of tone for the mayor. This is the same mayor who referred to our region as a political wasteland in 2015 after the NDP swept all 4 area ridings. But I do want to just turn to a quote that the mayor gave on election night federally in 2019. And he said, "I anticipate," I'll paraphrase, "that Windsor is in a better place moving forward than we were a few days ago, because we now have broad representation at different levels. And all of these folks who are elected, I look forward to working with them to advance the interests of our community." Well, there isn't much working together here. There isn't much wanting to be in a better position. We're at war, and we'll see how it continues to unfold. And, we've talked about it before. We'll move on to for your consideration now, but I wish that
I just want to say I have this wonderful, and that's, it's what was said then and what is happening now, John. I absolutely agree. It'd be great if Irek Kusmierczyk could come out and basically go, sit the fuck down. That's what I'd like to hear.
That's the one F-bomb that we get to drop every 4 episodes.
Now you gotta like put that warning on the podcast. Sorry, you can edit it. That's what I'd like to hear.
I guess we'll see this story moving forward now. I think it'll ramp up more as we continue to talk now about the border opening up and the potential for Canadians to cross over, get that second vaccine, but then they'll be forced to quarantine by our evil public health commission here in Canada. It's just, there's so many facts that are being omitted from this story. He likes to bring up the other cross-border crossing between the US and Canada that exists. He omits that it's going through a First Nation reserve that's cross-border, of which the US state and the tribe specifically asked for this to occur. Whereas what we're dealing with here, of course, they don't even have the city of Detroit or the state requesting this yet. So there's a lot of different facts at play here, but we will go into for your consideration for the outro of the show. I'm going to go up first with this one. It's pretty quick, and then we'll go into Doug on it. Gotta say, for your consideration, guys, I'm really upset with, former friend of the show, maybe former friend of the show for me, Councillor Kieran McKenzie.
That's what you say.
Very disappointed to see him spearheading a motion looking to allow for a municipality to have any level of input, quite frankly, between a medical cannabis user and his doctor or her doctor. The federal government has set up a system that allows for patients to be able to grow their cannabis if they have a federal license. Councillor McKenzie is seeking to include building standards, bylaw, fire inspections, zoning, even putting a municipal permit on it. All in all, I find it to be really reprehensible. I can't believe that the counselor would suggest that I should have to bring my federal health documents down to City Hall to request approval to produce my medication that I've already been provided the opportunity to. I don't think he knows how far reaching this may be, but I found it really gross that he's going after medical users and, not the people who are growing 4 plants in their backyard recreationally. You want to have a fight, go after that. But to go after medical users, I hate the slippery slope argument, but I really don't like the idea of a list at City Hall of who medical cannabis patients are. And he says that there's concern about diversion of medical cannabis into the illicit stream. Well, there's diversion of opioids into illicit streams as well, but I don't see any counselor at any level, any government across the country for that matter, suggesting that we should have a municipal database of prescription drug users, because that's an insane overreach that would never be breached. But it's easy to still stigmatize and discriminate against medical cannabis users. It's still very new. So I hope that the counselor would heed my suggestion when I say, back off, man. What the hell? That's
Duly considered.
Thank you.
Okay, I have a bit of a palate cleanser after that rant. I'm sharing some information that I think folks who listen to RCP will be interested in. From June 15th to 17th, the Windsor Law Center for Cities at the University of Windsor, along with the Canadian Urban Institute, are teaming up to bring a series of conversations to Windsor under the CUIX umbrella, with support from several city councillors, spearheaded by Councillor Bordelin, along with a host of great community organizations. I would name them, but I'm afraid there are so many great community organizations involved, I'm afraid of actually missing out on one. There are plenty of terrific locals attached to this thing, including many names that are well known to RCP listeners. Lots of past guests and panelists on RCP are a part of the lineup. I encourage RCP listeners to check it out. And if you want to register, you can go to canurb, canurb.org /CUI-X-Windsor for your consideration.
Absolutely. That would have been my for your consideration too. I just want to add to that. Go ahead, John. Sorry.
What a cop out. You can't just
No.
Yeah, that would have been mine too if I didn't just rant against Kieran. How about that?
He took mine.
He took mine for your consideration. No, you did a great job, Doug. Absolutely. Everyone should take a look at that. I do want to say, hat tip to the Center for Cities for making it happen. Actually, specifically Annika Smith, who those who are listening should go and take a look at the incredible reports that came out of the previous ones that were done. Edmonton, Calgary, I believe, is on that list. And we should be thrilled that this is coming to our community. I believe we're going to have somebody from the Canadian Urban Institute on our show. We've done an invitation. Hopefully we're going to have them with us next week when it's actually taking place. It is an absolutely incredible program. And I mean, talk about how far reaching it's going to be in terms of bringing all these folks together and having these really, really important conversations all the way to people who have left Windsor and why. Let's just put it this way. It's going to be a much better consultation and conversation that is going to happen in the remaining 5 days for the Adie Knox, pickleball thing.
Any event that brings Sean McAuliffe is a good event, and Windsor should be doing far more to champion him. And I can't wait to hear about how Windsor brunches are what made Windsor and how they're better than other brunches, because that book
There's
was
a lot of open
still
sessions. Great. Yeah, there are a lot of open sessions. People should go register. Absolutely. It's going to be a really, really terrific event. And it's been supported. I know you didn't want to mention organizations, Doug, but I know for a fact, this is the Urban Institute in many ways. Downtown is a going concern for urban issues. And so it runs the gamut of the kinds of urban issues that happen in a city collectively and more broadly, as well as what happens downtown. Reno Bordelin, I think, was the first city councilor to step up and actually give ward funds to it. Of course, the university is on board. I know that we're participating on as a downtown BIA and districting committee, and there's just a lot of individuals, many of them friends of the show, who have been part of making this all happen, from Nicole Belarjon to Princess Joe to Sarah Sipgar to Hugo Vega, and on it goes. A lot of phenomenal people part of making this all happen, and it's going to be the thing to be involved with next week, and we thank them for coming to our community to do it.
It's going to be a great event, so make sure you register. If you made it through to the end of this show with us, thank you for doing so. If not, I'm speaking into the ether, as I usually do, into the abyss. But this has been Rose City Politics. Tonight, our regular panel included Doug Sartori, Pat Papadeas, and myself, John Liedtke. Please make sure that you support us by becoming a Patreon subscriber at patreon.com/Rose City Politics, unless you are, in which case, thank you. We appear in print monthly in BizX magazine. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe. We're on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and wherever you get podcasts. And Rose City Politics broadcasts live on tape thanks to the kind support of Liuna 625, Building Better Communities. We will be back next week.